You wake up, reach for your phone, and before your feet even touch the floor, someone else has already begun shaping your day. A headline tells you what to fear. A notification tells you what deserves your attention. An algorithm quietly decides which faces you'll see, which ideas will echo in your mind, and which emotions will linger long after you've put the screen away. It happens so effortlessly that it doesn't feel like control. It feels like choice. And that's exactly what makes it so unsettling. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that has become almost invisible. It's not the fatigue that comes from working too hard or sleeping too little. It's deeper than that. It's the feeling that your thoughts are no longer entirely your own. That somewhere between endless scrolling, constant updates, and the pressure to keep up with the world moving faster every day, you've begun to lose something you can't quite name. Maybe you've noticed it during those quiet moments when the noise finally stops. Maybe you've caught yourself wondering why it's so difficult to sit alone with your own mind. Why silence suddenly feels uncomfortable. Why certainty has become so rare, even about the things you once believed with complete confidence. If you've ever felt that way, you're not alone. Millions of people are carrying the same invisible weight, often without realizing where it comes from. And according to historian and philosopher Yuval Noah Harari, we're approaching a moment unlike anything humanity has faced before. Not another political crisis. Not another technological revolution. Something much deeper. A point where the very meaning of being human begins to change. Not because machines become smarter than us overnight, but because we slowly forget how to think without them. That sounds dramatic. It almost sounds like science fiction. Yet history has a habit of making impossible ideas seem obvious in hindsight. Every civilization believed it understood the world until the world changed beneath its feet. There was a time when people believed the sun revolved around the earth. They weren't foolish. They simply lived inside the limits of the stories available to them. Then everything changed. Centuries later, entire societies believed kings ruled by divine right. That certainty vanished too. Every age creates its own illusion of permanence. Every generation quietly assumes that the way things are now is how they will always be. Our generation may be making the same mistake. We often think the greatest danger of technology is that robots might replace our jobs, or that artificial intelligence might write better essays, create better art, or make difficult decisions faster than humans ever could. Those concerns matter. But Harari points towards something far more fundamental. The greatest danger isn't that machines become human. It's that humans become increasingly machine-like. Not made of steel or circuits, but predictable, measurable, optimized, easily influenced. If someone can accurately predict what you'll buy, who you'll vote for, what you'll fear, who you'll fall in love with, and even when you'll feel lonely enough to click a certain advertisement, how much freedom remains inside those decisions? That question doesn't have an easy answer. And perhaps that's exactly why it deserves our attention. Human history has always been shaped by stories. Long before skyscrapers reached the clouds or satellites circled the earth, our ancestors gathered around fires beneath endless stars. They told stories about spirits living inside forests, about gods watching from the heavens, about ancestors whose wisdom guided every hunt and every harvest. Those stories weren't merely entertainment. They became invisible architecture. They organized entire civilizations. People fought wars because of stories, built temples because of stories, crossed oceans because of stories. Create money because enough people believed the same story about value. Even nations exist because millions of strangers agree to believe in shared myths larger than themselves. Harari often argues that Homo sapiens didn't become the dominant species because we were the strongest animals. We weren't. We weren't the fastest either. A tiger could overpower us. An eagle could see farther. A whale could survive oceans we couldn't even imagine crossing. What made humans different was our ability to cooperate in enormous numbers by believing shared ideas. It's a remarkable thought. Two strangers can trust each other, not because they know one another personally, but because they believe in the same legal system, the same currency, the same flag, or the same company. Stories became civilization's operating system. But every operating system eventually gets updated. Sometimes gradually, sometimes all at once. The agricultural revolution rewrote humanity's relationship with nature. The industrial revolution transformed our relationship with labor. The scientific revolution changed our relationship with truth. Now another transformation is unfolding. Only this time, it isn't merely changing what we do. It's changing who gets to decide what we think. For thousands of years, information traveled slowly. A rumor might take weeks to cross a kingdom. A philosophical idea could spend generations moving between continents. Human wisdom developed at roughly the speed of conversation. Now information travels around the planet before you finish reading this sentence. That sounds like progress. In many ways it is. Never before has knowledge been so accessible. Never before could someone sitting alone in a small apartment instantly learn astronomy from a professor across the world, or hear the music of culture separated by thousands of miles. Technology has given humanity extraordinary gifts. But every gift changes the hands that receive it. The same tools that connect us can quietly reshape us. When every moment competes for your attention, attention itself becomes the most valuable resource on Earth. Think about that for a moment. Oil fueled the last century, attention fuels this one. Entire industries now compete not for your money first, but for your focus. Because whoever captures your attention eventually shapes your behavior. And whoever shapes behavior gradually shapes identity. That transformation doesn't happen with dramatic announcements. It happens one notification at a time, one recommendation, one personalized video, one carefully designed headline, one tiny decision that feels completely harmless. Until one day you realize hours disappeared without your permission. Have you ever picked up your phone to check the weather, only to find yourself 40 minutes later watching videos you never intended to watch? At first, it seems like a simple distraction, but something deeper is happening beneath the surface. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's adapting. For hundreds of thousands of years, human survival depended on paying attention to novelty. A sudden movement in the bushes could mean food or danger. Either way, ignoring it could be fatal. Our ancestors evolved nervous systems that rewarded curiosity. Every unexpected sound triggered awareness. Every unfamiliar face demanded attention. That instinct kept us alive. Today's world has discovered how to monetize it. The same ancient brain that once searched forests for predators now searches endless feeds for novelty. Every swipe promises something new. Every refresh whispers the possibility of surprise. Your biology hasn't changed, the environment has. And when ancient instincts collide with modern technology designed by thousands of engineers studying human behavior, the outcome is rarely accidental. This is where Harari's warning begins to feel less like philosophy and more like a mirror. He asks a question that seems almost impossible to ignore once you've heard it. What happens when someone else understands your mind better than you do? Not through magic, not through mind reading, through data, every search, every pause, every purchase, every location, every late night moment when you're too tired to think clearly but still keep scrolling. Tiny fragments that seem meaningless alone become astonishingly revealing when collected together. Parts emerge, habits become visible, weaknesses become measurable. Soon, prediction becomes influence, and influence quietly becomes power. History teaches us that power has always belonged to those who controlled the most important resource of their era. Kings controlled land. Empires controlled trade routes. Industrialists controlled factories. Today, the most valuable territory may not be physical at all. It may be the landscape inside the human mind. That possibility feels uncomfortable, because we've spent centuries celebrating individual freedom as one of humanity's greatest achievements. We tell ourselves that we choose our careers, our beliefs, our relationships, our dreams. And many of those choices are deeply real. But what if the environment surrounding those choices has become increasingly invisible? What if influence no longer arrives through force? What if it arrives through convenience? History offers a fascinating clue. The ancient Romans rarely maintained control through violence alone. Roads connected distant provinces. Entertainment distracted restless populations. Infrastructure created dependence. Over time, people began participating willingly in systems that slowly reshaped everyday life. Control rarely feels like control when it arrives wrapped in comfort. That's one of history's oldest lessons, and perhaps one of its most relevant. The unsettling part isn't that technology exists. Humanity has always created tools. Fire changed civilization, writing changed memory, printing transformed knowledge, electricity rewrote daily life. Tools themselves are never the full story. The real question is always the same. Who is shaping whom? Are we using technology to deepen our humanity? Or is technology quietly redefining what humanity becomes? Somewhere between those questions lies the threshold Harari believes we're approaching. Not a single catastrophic event, not one dramatic moment the entire world will recognize, but a gradual crossing, a point where the decisions that define our future become so deeply embedded inside intelligent systems that we stop noticing we've handed them over. And perhaps the most dangerous part of all, we'll believe it was our idea. The unsettling truth is that human beings have never been as rational as we like to believe. We tell ourselves stories about being logical creatures, carefully weighing evidence before making decisions. But if you pay close attention to your own life, you'll notice something different. Most of your choices happen long before you're consciously aware of making them. The explanation comes afterward. The feeling comes first. Think about the last time you changed your mind about someone. It probably wasn't because you suddenly discovered one perfect fact. It was a slow accumulation of impressions, emotions, subtle experiences, and invisible influences. Your conscious mind simply arrived late to a decision that had already begun taking shape somewhere beneath the surface. Neuroscience has been revealing this hidden landscape for decades. Much of what we call thinking is actually the result of countless unconscious processes working behind the scenes. Your brain is constantly filtering information, predicting outcomes, recognizing patterns, and making tiny adjustments without asking for your permission. If it didn't, you'd be overwhelmed by the impossible task of consciously analyzing every sound, every face, every movement around you. This unconscious machinery is one of humanity's greatest strengths. It allows you to react instantly when danger appears. It helps you recognize a loved one's voice in a crowded room. It enables creativity by connecting ideas that seem unrelated. Without it, everyday life would become painfully slow. But every strength has a shadow. If your unconscious mind can guide your behavior for your benefit, it can also be influenced by forces you never notice. This is where Harari's warning becomes deeply personal. Artificial intelligence doesn't need to become conscious to reshape civilization. It doesn't need emotions. It doesn't need dreams. It simply needs to become better than you at predicting what you will do next. And in many situations, it already is. That realization feels almost offensive because we spend our lives building an identity around the idea of being unique. We believe our preferences define us. Our opinions make us individuals. Our personalities separate us from everyone else. But what if many of those preferences are far more predictable than we imagine? Have you ever searched for something online, only to find advertisements following you across the internet for days? At first, it feels like a harmless convenience. Then it becomes strangely unsettling. It's as though the digital world is watching, not in the dramatic way movies portray surveillance, but with quiet patience, learning little pieces of who you are every single day. Now expand that idea far beyond shopping. Imagine systems learning when you're most vulnerable emotionally, learning which words make you anxious, which images hold your attention, which political messages resonate when you're tired, which music makes you nostalgic, which fears make you more likely to believe a certain story. Piece by piece, a portrait emerges, not of who you say you are, but of how you actually behave. And behavior has always been the currency of power. Psychologists have long understood that people rarely change because of facts alone. We change because of emotion. We defend beliefs that make us feel safe. We reject information that threatens our identity. We seek confirmation more often than truth, because certainty feels more comfortable than ambiguity. Our minds evolved for survival, not perfect objectivity. Thousands of years ago, that tendency helped small tribes stay united against external threats. Shared beliefs strengthened cooperation. Doubt could become dangerous if it fractured the group's trust. Today those same instincts operate inside a world connected by billions of screens. Instead of campfires, we gather around algorithms. Instead of tribal elders, recommendation systems quietly determine which voices become familiar. Instead of wandering through forests, we wander through carefully personalized realities. Every person sees a slightly different version of the world. That may be one of the most extraordinary transformations in human history. For most of civilization, neighbors experience roughly the same reality. They heard similar stories, read similar newspapers, attended the same schools, shared local traditions, and argued over common facts. Now, two people can live next door to one another, while inhabiting completely different informational universes. One believes society is collapsing. Another believes humanity has never been healthier. One sees hope everywhere. Another sees only catastrophe. Neither necessarily arrive there through careful philosophical reflection. Often, they simply follow different digital pathways. The frightening part isn't disagreement. Humanity has always disagreed. The frightening part is that invisible systems increasingly shape which disagreements become possible in the first place. Carl Jung believed that much of human behavior is driven by forces hidden beneath conscious awareness. He described the shadow as the part of ourselves we refuse to see. The impulses, fears, desires, and contradictions that quietly influence our actions from the darkness. Most people imagine the shadow as something deeply personal. But what if civilization itself has developed a shadow? A collective unconscious made visible through billions of digital interactions. Every search exposing curiosity. Every comment revealing anger. Every click uncovering desire. Every pause exposing hesitation. Humanity has never produced so much psychological evidence about itself. Not in libraries, not in laboratories, but through ordinary daily behavior. Without intending to, we've become participants in the largest psychological experiment ever conducted. No emperor possessed this level of knowledge about his people. No philosopher had access to such intimate patterns of human behavior. No civilization has ever generated such an enormous archive of its own subconscious. The question is no longer whether this information exists. The question is who understands it best. History offers another unsettling reminder. Whenever new forms of knowledge emerged, they transformed the balance of power. The invention of writing gave governments the ability to organize vast kingdoms. Printing challenged religious authority by spreading ideas beyond elite control. Industrial machinery shifted power toward those who owned factories rather than farmland. Knowledge has never remained politically neutral. Data may become the defining knowledge of our age. And if data becomes more valuable than land, oil, or manufacturing, then understanding human behavior becomes the greatest strategic advantage imaginable. Harari often argues that humans may soon face competition unlike anything in history. Not from stronger bodies, but from superior decision-making systems. For thousands of years, humans remained indispensable because only humans could interpret complex situations, negotiate uncertainty, and make meaningful judgments. But what happens when algorithms begin outperforming people in more and more of those domains? Not perfectly, just consistently enough. We've already grown comfortable asking navigation apps how to drive, streaming platforms what to watch, and recommendation engines what to read. These choices seem insignificant because they save time, yet habits have a remarkable way of expanding. The more often a system makes successful decisions for you, the easier it becomes to trust it with larger ones. One day it's choosing your route home, another day it's recommending who you should date. Eventually it may suggest careers, financial investments, medical treatments, educational paths, or political candidates. None of those recommendations need to be mandatory. Convenience often proves more persuasive than coercion. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the importance of governing one's own mind, because external circumstances are never fully under our control. The Stoics understood that true freedom wasn't found in controlling the world. It came from mastering the space between stimulus and response. That ancient wisdom feels surprisingly modern, because today's greatest battle may no longer be over physical territory. It may be over that tiny space inside your consciousness before you react. The pause before anger. The silence before sharing a headline. The breath before accepting someone else's interpretation of reality. Modern life rarely gives us that pause. Everything encourages immediate reaction, instant opinions, instant outrage, instant certainty. But wisdom has never been instant. The Buddha spoke of the restless mind as something constantly chasing pleasure while fleeing discomfort. More than 2,000 years later, neuroscience tells a remarkably similar story. The brain naturally seeks rewards while avoiding pain. Dopamine reinforces behaviors that promise satisfaction, even when the reward itself is fleeting. Technology didn't invent this tendency. It industrialized it. Every notification becomes a possibility. Every like becomes a tiny emotional signal. Every endless feed offers another chance that the next swipe will finally satisfy whatever restless feeling has been quietly growing inside you. Sometimes it does. For a moment, then the hunger returns. Not because you're weak, because your nervous system evolved in a completely different world. A world where rewards were scarce instead of infinite. Where silence was normal instead of uncomfortable. Where boredom often became the birthplace of creativity rather than something to escape. Have you ever noticed that your clearest thoughts rarely arrive while you're staring at a screen? They appear during long walks, while driving without music, watching rain fall against a window, standing beneath a sky so wide that your problems suddenly seem smaller than they did an hour ago. Those moments aren't empty, they're mentally fertile. They're spaces where your own mind begins speaking again, after spending hours listening to everyone else's. Perhaps that's what makes this moment in history so significant. The greatest competition may not be between humans and artificial intelligence. It may be between reflection and distraction, between awareness and automation, between becoming the author of your own inner life, or quietly allowing it to be written for you. And somewhere inside that choice lies a question every generation eventually has to answer. Not simply what kind of world it wants to build, but what kind of human being it refuses to stop becoming. There is a temptation that has followed humanity through every era. We convince ourselves that the future will arrive slowly enough for us to notice. That if something truly dangerous were approaching, there would be alarms, headlines, unmistakable signs that everyone could agree on. History tells a different story. Entire civilizations have crossed invisible thresholds, without recognizing them until years later. The invention of agriculture didn't feel like the birth of civilization to the first farmers. The printing press didn't immediately announce the end of medieval Europe. The Industrial Revolution wasn't experienced as a single dramatic event. It unfolded quietly, factory by factory, invention by invention, until one day people realized the world they had inherited no longer existed. Perhaps that is what makes Harari's warning so unsettling. The point of no return may not be a date on a calendar. It may be a collection of tiny decisions that seem insignificant on their own but become irreversible together. Every time we trade privacy for convenience, every time we surrender curiosity for certainty, every time we allow a machine to make a decision we no longer wish to understand ourselves, none of these choices feels catastrophic. But civilizations are rarely transformed by one enormous leap. They are transformed by habits. And habits, repeated over years, become culture. Culture eventually becomes destiny. This is where many conversations about artificial intelligence take a wrong turn. We become fascinated by spectacular questions. Will machines become conscious? Will robots replace every job? Will computers one day surpass human intelligence in every measurable way? Those questions matter, but they can distract us from the quieter transformation already unfolding. The deeper question is whether human beings will continue exercising the capacities that once defined them. Think about memory. For most of history, memory was one of humanity's greatest treasures. Entire epics were passed from one generation to another through careful recitation. Philosophers trained themselves to remember astonishing amounts of knowledge. A person's wisdom often depended on what they carried within their own mind. Today, we carry something different. We carry devices that remember everything for us. Phone numbers, birthdays, appointments, directs, facts, photographs, conversations, none of this is inherently bad. External memory has freed us to solve problems our ancestors could scarcely imagine. But every tool changes the user. When a muscle is no longer exercised, it weakens. Perhaps the same is true for certain capacities of the mind. The concern is not that technology makes us less intelligent. It may simply make us less practiced at being deeply attentive. And attention has always been the birthplace of wisdom. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once warned that people can become so consumed by comfort that they gradually lose the strength required to confront difficult truths. He wasn't speaking about smartphones or algorithms, yet his insight feels strangely prophetic. Comfort has never been the enemy. Dependence has. There is a subtle difference between using a tool and becoming unable to function without it. One expands freedom. The other quietly replaces it. Have you ever left your phone at home and felt a wave of anxiety almost immediately? Not because someone urgently needed you, but because a part of your mind suddenly felt incomplete. That reaction isn't something to be ashamed of. It is something to observe. Observation has always been the beginning of freedom. The Stoics believe that we suffer less from reality than from our unconscious relationship with it. Before we can change the world around us, we have to notice the forces operating within us. That idea has never been more relevant, because the greatest influence technology exerts is often invisible. It shapes not only what we do, it shapes what feels normal. When every spare moment is filled with stimulation, stillness begins to feel uncomfortable. When every opinion is instantly rewarded or punished, uncertainty begins to feel dangerous. When every experience is documented for others, private moments start to feel incomplete. Without realizing it, our definition of a meaningful life begins to shift, not according to deliberate reflection, but according to the incentives built into the systems surrounding us. This is why Harari repeatedly returns to one central concern: human agency. Agency is a simple word with enormous consequences. It is your capacity to choose consciously, rather than react automatically. To recognize an impulse without obeying it. To question an assumption before accepting it. To notice fear without allowing it to dictate every decision. If enough people lose that capacity, democracy itself begins to change. Markets begin to change, relationships begin to change, even love begins to change. Because every meaningful human institution depends on individuals who possess enough self-awareness to make authentic choices. If our decisions become increasingly predictable and increasingly influenced by systems designed to optimize engagement rather than wisdom, we may not lose freedom through force, we may lose it through convenience. And history suggests that convenience is one of the most persuasive forces ever discovered. But there is another possibility, one that rarely receives the same attention. Every technological revolution has also forced humanity to rediscover what